Burn, witch, burn. Written by Abraham Merritt. Narrated by Edward E. French. Chapter 11. Technique of Madame Mandalip. There was an agony in her eyes that forbade the truth, so I lied to her. I can comfort you as to that, at least. Your husband died of entirely natural causes, from a blood clot to the brain. My examination satisfied me thoroughly as to that. You had nothing to do with it. As for the doll, you had an unusually vivid dream, that is all. She looked at me as one who would give her soul to believe. She said, "But I heard him die." It is quite possible. I plunged into a somewhat technical explanation which I knew she would not quite understand, but would, perhaps, be therefore convincing. You may have been half awake, on what we term the borderline of waking consciousness. In all probability, the entire dream was suggested by what you heard. Your subconsciousness tried to explain the sounds and conceived the whole fantastic drama you have recited to me. What seemed, in your dream, to take up many minutes actually passed through your mind in a split second. The subconsciousness makes its own time. It is a common experience. A door slams, or there is some other abrupt and violent sound. It awakens the sleeper. When he is fully awake, he has recollection of some singularly vivid dream which ended with a loud noise. In reality, his dream began with the noise. The dream may have seemed to him to have taken hours. It was, in fact, almost instantaneous, taking place in the brief moment between noise and awakening. She drew a deep breath. Her eyes lost some of their agony. I pressed my advantage. And there is another thing you must remember. Your condition. It makes many women peculiarly subject to realistic dreams, usually of an unpleasant character, sometimes even to hallucinations. She whispered, "That is true. When little Molly was coming, I had the most dreadful dreams." She hesitated. I saw doubt again cloud her face. "But the doll is gone," she said. I cursed myself at that, caught unawares and with no ready answer. But McCann had one. He said easily, "Sure it's gone, Molly. I dropped it down the chute into the waste. After what you told me, I thought you'd better not see it any more." She asked sharply, "Where did you find it? I looked for it." "Guess you weren't in shape to do much looking," he answered. "I found it down at the foot of the kid's crib, all messed up in the covers. It was busted. Looked like the kid had been dancing on it in her sleep," she said hesitantly. "It might have slipped down. I don't think I looked there," I said severely, so she might not suspect collusion between McCann and myself. "You ought not to have done that, McCann. If you had shown the doll to her, Mrs. Gilmore would have known at once that she had been dreaming, and she would have been spared much pain." "Well, I ain't a doctor." His voice was sullen. "I done what I thought best." "Go down and see if you can find it," I ordered, tartly. He glanced at me sharply. I nodded and hoped he understood. In a few minutes he returned. "They cleaned out the waste only 15 minutes ago," he reported lugubriously. "The doll went with it. I found this, though." He held up a little strap from which dangled a half-dozen miniature books. He asked, "Was them what you dreamed the doll dropped on the dressing table, Molly?" She stared and shrank away. "Yes," she whispered. "Please put it away, Dan. I don't want to see it." He looked at me triumphantly. "I guess maybe I was right when I threw the doll away, Doc," I said. "At any rate, now that Mrs. Gilmore is satisfied it was all a dream, there's no harm done." And now I took her cold hands in mine. "I'm going to prescribe for you. I don't want you to stay in this place a moment longer than you can help. I want you to pack a bag with whatever you and little Molly may need for a week or so, and leave at once. I'm thinking of your condition, and a little life that is on its way. I will attend to the necessary formalities. You can instruct McCann as to the other details, but I want you to go. Will you do this?" To my relief, she assented readily. There was a somewhat harrowing moment when she and the child bade farewell to the body. But before many minutes she was on her way with McCann to relations. The child had wanted to take the boy and girl dolls. I had refused to allow this, even at the risk of again arousing the mother's suspicions. I wanted nothing of Madame Mandalip to accompany them to their refuge. McCann supported me, and the dolls were left behind. I called an undertaker whom I knew. I made a last examination of the body. The minute puncture would not be noticed. I was sure there was no danger of an autopsy, since my certification of the cause of death would not be questioned. When the undertaker arrived, I explained the absence of the wife, imminent maternity, and departure at my order. I set down the cause of death as thrombosis, rather grimly as I recalled the similar diagnosis of the banker's physician and what I had thought of it. After the body had been taken away, and as I sat waiting for McCann to return, I tried to orient myself to this phantasmagoria through which, it seemed to me, I had been moving for endless time. I tried to divest my mind of all prejudice, all preconceived ideas of what could and could not be. I began by conceding that this Madame Mandalip might possess some wisdom of which modern science is ignorant. I refuse to call it witchcraft or sorcery. The words mean nothing, since they've been applied through the ages to entirely natural phenomena whose causes were not understood by the laity. Not long ago, for example, the lighting of a match was witchcraft to many savage tribes. No, Madame Mandalip was no witch, as Ricori thought her. She was mistress of some unknown science. That was all. And being a science, it must be governed by fixed laws, unknown though those laws might be to me. If the doll-maker's activities defied cause and effect, as I conceived them, still they must conform to laws of cause and effect of their own. There was nothing supernatural about them. It was only that, like the savages, I did not know what made the match burn. Something of these laws, something of the woman's technique, using the word as signifying the details, collectively considered, of mechanical performance in any art, I thought I perceived. The knotted cord, the witch's ladder, apparently was an essential in the animation of the dolls. One had been slipped into Ricori's pocket before the first attack upon him. I had found another beside his bed after the disturbing occurrences of the night. I had gone to sleep holding one of the cords, and had tried to murder my patient. A third cord had accompanied the doll that had killed John Gilmore. Clearly, then, the cord was a part of the formula for the direction of control of the dolls. Against this was the fact that the intoxicated stroller could not have been carrying one of the ladders when attacked by the Peters doll. It might be, however, that the cord had only to do with the initial activity of the puppets, that once activated, their action might continue for an indefinite period. There was evidence of a fixed formula in the making of the dolls. First, it seemed the prospective victim's free consent to serve as model must be obtained. Second, a wound, which gave the opportunity to apply the salve which caused the unknown death. Third, the doll must be a faithful replica of the victim. That the agency of death was the same in each case was proven by the similar symptoms. But did those deaths actually have anything to do with the motility of the dolls? Were they actually a necessary part of the operation? The doll-maker might believe so. Indeed, undoubtedly did believe so. I did not. That the doll which had stabbed Ricori had been made in a semblance of Peter's, that the nurse doll which the guards had seen poised on my window ledge might have been the one for which Walters had posed, that the doll which had thrust the pin into Gilmore's brain was, perhaps, the replica of little Anita, the 11-year-old schoolgirl. At this I admitted. But that anything of Peters, anything of Walters, anything of Anita that animated these dolls, that dying, something of their vitality, their minds, their souls had been drawn from them, had been transmuted into an essence of evil and imprisoned in these wire-skeletoned puppets. Against this all my reason revolted. I could not force my mind to accept even the possibility. My analysis was interrupted by the return of McCann. He said, laconically, "Well, we put it over." I asked, "McCann, you weren't by any chance telling the truth when you said you found the doll?"
"No, Doc. The doll was gone, all right."
"But where did you get the little books?"
"Just where Molly said the doll tossed them, on her dressing table. I snaked them after she'd told me her story. She hadn't noticed them. I had a hunch. It was a good one, wasn't it?"
"You had me wondering," I replied. I don't know what we could have said if she had asked for the knotted cord.
"The cord didn't seem to make much of a dent on her."
He hesitated.
"But I think it means a hell of a lot, Doc. I think if I hadn't took her out and John hadn't happened home and Molly had opened the box instead of him, I think it's Molly he'd have found lying dead beside him."
"You mean?"
"I mean the dolls go for whichever gets the cords," he said somberly.
Well, it was much the same thought I had in my own mind. I asked, "But why should anybody want to kill Molly?"
"Maybe somebody thinks she knows too much. And that brings me to what I've been wanting to tell you. The Mandalip hag knows she's being watched."
"Well, her watches are better than ours," I echoed Ricori, and I told McCann then of the second attack of the night and why I had sought him.
"And that,"
he said when I had ended,
"proves the Mandalip hag knows who's who behind the watch on her. She tried to wipe out both the boss and Molly. She's on to us, Doc."
"The dolls are accompanied," I said. "The musical note is a summons. They do not disappear into thin air. They answer the note and make their way, somehow, to whoever sounds the note. The dolls must be taken from the shop. Therefore, 1 or 2 women must take them. How did they evade your watches?"
"I don't know."
The lean face was worried.
"The fish-white gal does it. Let me tell you what I found out, Doc. After I left you last night to go down to see what the boys have to say, I hear plenty. They say about 4 o'clock the gal goes in the back and the old woman takes a chair in the store. They don't think nothing of that. But about 7, who do they see walking down the street and into the doll joint but the gal? They give the boys in the back hell, but they ain't seen her go, and they pass the buck to the boys in front. Then, about 11 o'clock, one of the relief lads comes in with worse news. He says he's down at the foot of Broadway when a coupe turns the corner, and driving it is the gal. He can't be mistaken because he's seen her in the doll joint. She goes up Broadway at a clip. He sees there ain't nobody trailing her, and he looks around for a taxi. Of course, there's nothing in sight, not even a parked car he can lift. So he comes down to the gang to ask what the hell they mean by it, and again nobody's seen the gal go. I take a couple of the boys, and we start out to comb the neighborhood to find out where she stables the coupe. We don't have no luck at all until about 4 o'clock when one of the lads who's been looking, meets up with me. He says that about 3 he sees the gal, at least he thinks it's the gal, walking along the street around the corner from the joint. She's got a couple of big suitcases, but they don't seem to trouble her none. She's walking quick, but away from the doll joint. He eases over to get a better look when all of a sudden she ain't there. He sniffs around the place he's seen her. There ain't hide nor hair of her. It's pretty dark, and he tries the doors and the areaways, but the doors are locked and there ain't nobody in the areaways. So he gives up and hunts me. I look over the place. It's about a third down the block around the corner from the doll joint. The doll joint is 8 numbers from the corner. They're mostly shops and I guess storage up above. Not many people living there. The houses all old ones. Still, I don't see how the gal can get to the doll joint. I think maybe the tale's mistaken. He's seen somebody else, or just thinks he's seen somebody. But we scout close around, and after a while we see a place that looks like it might stable a car. Don't take us long to open the doors, and sure enough, there's a coupe with its engine still hot. It ain't been in long. Also, it's the same kind of coupe the lad who's seen the gal says she was driving. I lock the place up again and go back to the boys. I watch with them the rest of the night. Not a light in the doll joint. But nigh 8 o'clock, the gal shows up inside the shop and opens up.
"Still," I said at this point, "you have no real evidence she had been out. The girl your man thought he saw might not have been she at all." He looked at me pityingly.
"She got out in the afternoon without him seeing her, didn't she? What's to keep her from doing the same thing at night? The lad saw her driving a coupe, didn't he? And we find a coupe like it close to where the wench dropped out of sight."
I sat thinking. There was no reason to disbelieve McCann, and there was a sinister coincidence in the hours the girl had been seen. I said, half aloud, "The time she was out in the afternoon coincides with the time the doll was left at the Gilmores. The time she was out at night coincides with the time of the attack upon Ricori and the death of John Gilmore."
"You hit the plum in the eye,"
said McCann.
"She goes and leaves the doll at Molly's and comes back. She goes and sets the dolls on the boss. She waits for him to pop out. Then she goes and collects the one she's left at Molly's. Then she beats it back home. They're in the suitcases she's carrying."
I could not hold back the irritation of helpless mystification that swept me. "And I suppose you think she got out of the house by riding a broomstick up the chimney," I said sarcastically.
"No,"
he answered seriously.
"No, I don't, Doc. But them houses are old, and I think maybe there's a rat hole of a passage or something she gets through. Anyway, the hands are watching the street and the coop stable now, and she can't pull that again."
He added morosely,
"At that, I ain't saying she couldn't bridle a broomstick if she had to."
I said abruptly, "McCann, I'm going down to talk to this Madame Mandalip. I want you to come with me." He said,
"I'll be right beside you, Doc, with my fingers on my guns."
I said, "No, I'm going to see her alone, but I want you to keep close watch outside." He did not like that, argued, at last reluctantly assented. I called up my office. I talked to Braille and learned that Ricori was recovering with astonishing rapidity. I asked Braille to look after things the balance of the day, inventing a consultation to account for the request. I had myself switched to Ricori's room. I had the nurse tell him that McCann was with me, that we were making an investigation along a certain line, the results of which I would inform him on my return, and that, unless Ricori objected, I wanted McCann to stay with me the balance of the afternoon. Ricori sent back word that McCann should follow my orders as though they were his own. He wanted to speak to me, but that I did not want. Pleading urgent haste, I rang off. I ate an excellent and hearty lunch. I felt that it would help me hold tighter to the realities, or what I thought were the realities, when I met this apparent mistress of illusions. McCann was oddly silent and preoccupied. The clock was striking 3 when I set off to meet Madame Mandalip. A reading from Abraham Merritt's Burn, Witch, Burn. Edward E. French speaking. The copyright exists on all recordings by Edward E. French. Inquiries are welcome at this hotmail address, edwardfrench06@hotmail.com. That's edwardfrench06@hotmail.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. We're on YouTube, the Fiction Fantastique channel, and that address is www.youtube.com/ I said /. Are you listening? All right, we'll try it again. www.youtube.com/ French Edward 06. Thank you.